Originally from small town Kentucky, USA, moved to France aged 20 with no money and no job. Now, managing partner of Authentic Leadership International, working with Fortune 500 leaders and Nobel laureates, she role models leadership. She brings clarity, courage, confidence into helping people to discover their highest purpose and how they can flourish. Hello, and thank you for joining me on the Practical Leadership Podcast. My name is Paul Morton. I'm your host. We try to distill the hard-earned wisdom of CEOs, executives, and high performers around the world into actionable insights that you can take away and put into your leadership practices really quickly. If it's time for you to look at your own management teams and help move them from being accidental into being intentional, then in 9 short weeks, the Practical Leadership Playbook course will help you do just that. Check out the Practical Leadership Academy. And now, on with the show. Colleen Slaughter, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Paul, for having me. It's quite an intro.
So, Kentucky, right? Small town Kentucky. You got on a plane, you had your bag, and you got off at the other end and went, parlez-vous anglais?
Exactly. Exactly. I was the typical American with not enough French under my belt before I landed. So I definitely felt inadequate, but I've always been insecure overachiever, right? Meaning anyway, I've always had that, when I have a mentor that called it the NGEs, right? The not good enoughs. So that was the language gap, at least in the beginning, was definitely food for that thought process.
I
Yeah.
suppose there are things that do just feed into the sort of insecurity, the need to succeed, is the fear of failure is the other side of that. All these things play off of each other, sometimes for success, sometimes for pain. You know.
Oh, it has both sides, indeed.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That drive within me has served a wonderful purpose. I mean, 99.9% of the time here, when people, as you know, living as I live in France, ask me where I'm from, half of them say, well, where is that? But the 99.9%, I've never met anybody from Kentucky, right? So it's not everybody from any Kentuckian necessarily that gets on a plane and comes. And then, we did the whole French business school thing, starting a business. Like, it definitely has had its peaks, its perks along the way. But there's always that shadow side, to your point, right? And that means being really hard on myself. And when I'm doing that, I can also be really hard on other people. And that makes it harder for people to be around. I have a way of pushing people away when I'm also being hard on myself. So I've also needed to learn how to curb that, right? Soften that aspect and keep the drive, but keep it in a way that is more aligned with things that are important to me, rather than just trying to get ahead of whomever it might be out there.
I think like any of the good things that we have in our characteristics, there's a red line, like you push the accelerator too hard, it goes into the red line, your engine explodes and pops out your bonnet, right? Pops out the hood.
Yeah, for sure. There's
Mm.
always the shadow and the light of everything.
So you talk about role modeling leadership. So is that, what are the traits then? What are the things that you've had in yourself that you recognize that this is useful, but if I go too far, I'm just going to piss people off. I'm gonna push them away. They're not gonna want to work with me.
Yeah, well, that I can list several. One is what I've already just mentioned, and I'll call it the word success, or drive for success, or achievement, right? And the idea of being hard with myself and then hard with others. Another is I've had always a really strong intuition, and that can translate into a strong knowing or a strong, let's say, conviction, being convicted. And that can also serve to push people away, because I can seem like a know-it-all and seem unopened to other viewpoints.
Hmm.
And of course, I could be wrong too, right? And that's been actually a freeing journey to learn. It's been humbling in a good sense, but not humiliating, right? It's been freeing to be like, oh, I don't have to always be right. You know? So that, that phrase, if you spot it, you got it.
The one who smelt it dealt it. Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of that one. I
Oh,
like that.
that's my son's one.
Yeah,
It's from farts, you know?
that's a great one. If you smelt it, you dealt it. I love it. Yes, if you spot it, you got it. So very more often than not, when some trait irritates me in another person, I can be sure that that's what I have. Right. And self-righteousness is one of them for sure. And I'm like, oh, this must be plastered across my chest for other people to see, you know? So yeah, for sure. I mean, the whole thing starts with what I hear you say underneath it all is self-awareness,
Yeah.
right? It's just being aware because of course I'm a human too. And I do have my foibles. And to your point, learning how to balance that, right? To balance, be aware of them, but not give them too much attention. Um, Thank you for being there. We know you mean well, that kind of thing, like what we've been taught to do with fear, but also focus more on my strengths and developing those.
Yeah. And there's a great argument for building strengths above anything else. You look at any individual and you say, well, you're a 3 in the scale, 3 out of 10 in this, and you're a 7 out of 10 in that. Let's start with a 3 out of 10 because you suck. Okay, yeah. Why? You know, why don't you focus in on, and it's the natural nature. Are you going to go on a course? You're going to work on things you don't know how to do, right? Okay, that's one angle. Or you can look at the stuff that you're reasonably good at, take it from a 7 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10. What would you rather have? A room full of 9s out of 10s or a room full of now not 3s, but maybe 4s? It's a no-brainer. But it's one of those almost counterintuitive things. You send somebody off to fix themselves because they're broken rather than to improve themselves because they're nearly great.
Yeah. Well, that's also that insecurity thing that especially the high achievers, right? Of perfection, which is a word that makes me laugh today. But yet I have moments where I fall into it as well and believing it. And that what my favorite quote, and anybody who's listening to the different conversations I've been on might get tired. I say this a lot, but I love it. Nelson Mandela, who said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. So like what you had said earlier around failure, that's another one that makes me giggle. And so, I mean, there's so many people that use that word, right? And so many people, and I certainly have done it and used the word perfection as well, like I said. But really, we're chasing an illusion, right? With perfection. And with failure, we're afraid of something that doesn't exist. So it's like being afraid of monsters in the under the bed or something, right? So when we can really get to the point of seeing that, it's another thing that can be freeing.
It's massively liberating, I think. And I still struggle with it's the learning thing. So I firmly believe you can outlearn the competition. You need to learn lots of stuff. I love learning things, but my red line in that is that I'll gather more information. I need to study more. I need to work on this more before I actually do a damn thing. And JFDI, which is just flaming well, get on with it.
Oh, I like that what I learned.
Just do it, right? JFDI
I like that one.
is core to how I get anything done, if I ever get anything done, which is, stop fanning about. Just
Get started.
produce it, create it, build it, send
Get
it.
into action. Exactly. Just get into action.
Bias for action, And I'm fine doing that with other people. Great doing that with other people, right? In fact, I push people like a crazy thing, but see when it's for me. Oh,
yeah. It's where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Totally.
In those quiet moments when no one's looking and I have the option to go down road A, even if just a little bit, right? Or the option to go down road B. That's where the rubber meets the road. Yeah, which is it going to be?
And I don't know whether you find this when you're actually working with other people, is that I have all these great ideas and good plans, frameworks, methodologies. I can help people focus, all that sort of stuff. But turning the mirror on yourself, this self-awareness thing is super hard. It is really super hard. there's a great wee thing. I think it comes from my mum, and she says that, it's really hard to read the label on the bottle when you're inside it. So if you are advising somebody else, you can see so much. You can know what's going on, or within reason, and help them. But if you're inside the bottle yourself, even though you know the answer, it's very difficult to apply that knowledge to yourself, I find. Maybe that's just me being a bit crap, but I find it's quite hard to take your own advice.
Yeah, I don't, it's not crap at all. And there's another phrase that I love about what your mother said around when you're inside the bottle, it's hard to see the instructions, right? But, this begets the question of, and we can get really esoteric here, but just to keep it in words that makes it not so esoteric, right? This question of what are we made of? Like, who are we really?
Hmm.
And for most of my life, just keeping the focus on me, right? With your question earlier, I really thought I was my behavior. I was my achievements. I was all this outside stuff. And when I learned, it's been in the last decade, really, that there are two parts of me, right? There is the behavior piece, and certainly that could be questionable at times, right? Like I'm human, like anybody. But really fundamentally, there is the essence of me too. And that can never be bad, right? That is unquestionably good all the time. And when I realized that it didn't matter what I did, that wasn't going to affect my worth, let's say, because there's a word, worthy. In my opinion, we don't speak enough about that in the business world, by the way. That then all of a sudden the whip that I was getting out about myself of having to do this and, cheering myself on or forcing myself or whatever it is, right, to do the right thing. All of a sudden, when I could attach my actions to the fact that it was a reflection of my worth, a reflection of my essence, all of a sudden it became so much easier, right? And it even started feeling better to just do the more, I'll use the word here, loving actions, right? Toward myself or toward others, to take the actions that are going to be better for everyone, even if in the moment I didn't get high from them, right? Because there's definitely actions that in the moment, it could be TV binging, ice cream binging, whatever it is that in the moment, woo, I'm taking another place, right? But longer term, not really great for me, at least, right? And then there's a chain reaction that ends up happening to the people I'm in contact with. Whereas when I just realized, is that really going to help me reflect the best part of who I am? And there's always going to be the teenager in me. We were talking earlier about age, right? And there's always going to be this rebellious teenager in me, no matter what. And she definitely has her say and wins over quite a bit. But more and more, she's getting convinced that, not so sure the immediate high is worth it, right? For a longer term bliss, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. You use worth, you use love, and there's also duty. Duty is a good one. These are all big, grown-up values. These are all really scary words. I think as soon as you start unpacking any of these things, like we're vaguely attempting to using imperfect tools, you discover, like you said here, this second part of life. And I don't know whether it's in fact, you know what, I do know whether I think it is an age thing that you get to your second wind. And there's a book there. You get to the second wind, and there's a point where you recognize that your value so far has been in your accumulated knowledge and experience and the application thereof, and that's what you're getting paid for. But your value transitions and your worth transitions to being from the things you've learned and things you can do and how clever you are at riding your bicycle and whatever it is, into being less of a vessel and more of a conduit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what you know, but it's the questions you ask. It's the stories that you can tell based on the knowledge you have in order to elicit feedback, information, and experience and behavioral change in other people. And you lean on love. And we don't talk about love at work, because if you do that too much, you get a call from HR But there are
Especially in the US,
well,
right?
especially in the US, yeah. But there are C.S. Lewis talks about he writes a book. He's written a book called The Four Loves, and there is eros, which is romantic love, your husband, your wife. There is philia with your brothers, sisters, that closeness. There's storge, which is reliable love of friendship, and there's agape. And agape is the one which is sometimes called the divine love, the love of God for us all. But it's the willful, the willing of good in others. It's the selfless willing of the best in other people. And any sort of leadership approach has to, I think, come from that place. It's, I want you to be successful, and I'm going to work to make you successful. It's not about me. And that change from being the vessel to being the conduit, I think, turns slightly grayer, older people into being incredibly good leaders
Part of life stage for sure.
if they recognize it. If they recognize it. And if they recognize it earlier, simply by telling people, it's not all about you, by the way. Your job is to make them successful. You can kind of short circuit it. You don't get the life experience, and you'll get there eventually, but at least you get the behavioral aspect of it. That's something that comes through. In the work that you do, what do you think the biggest need is of the leaders that you come encounter?
Well, I think you've just pointed it. The biggest need is, well, first of all, I do tend to attract to your point, those who are recognizing on their own, there's got to be more here, right? I have the money, I'm partner of whatever firm you want to say, right? Multiple cars, beautiful wardrobe, multiple houses, and I'm miserable. So it's clearly not the outside trappings that other people may have told me or I thought would make me happy. There's got to be something more. And I know what it might be. I know what I really would love to put in the world. Not necessarily changing jobs. Some people do, right? But some people also find they can do this in their current role. But am I still going to be able to have impact? Am I still going to be able to make sure the KPIs are met? So that's one big question. And then for some of them, it is once they start seeing that that putting their values in place and getting more meaning at work, actually, they can go beyond the objectives they thought they could, right? They're really creating this amazing movement because it's infectious when we're leading from the inside out. It really is. Meaning we're leading from our values and purpose rather than, oh, this is the list of job requirements, or these are the objectives that were imposed on me, right? They're two very different energies. And the one from values and purpose is really infectious. But then their big question is, okay, how do I really make this, excuse me, how do I make this even bigger in the world, right? How do I take this and make this sustainable going forward? So essentially it's how do I step more into my purpose and make other people want to do the same. Yeah.
Well, I try to have a how-to as a title of these episodes.
Oh, I like it.
And you just named it, I think. So it's how to have the higher purpose. Okay, what's the 3-step Colleen's plan? How do you do it? Somebody's listening to this and they go, that's me. That's me. What do I do next, Colleen? What do I do?
What do I do next? Well, first is get clear on what your real values are. Now, that might seem like a no-brainer. Listen, I went to Catholic grade school and high school, so 12 years of Catholic education. At the end of that, I could tell you what I thought my values were. But the truth is, as a recovering people pleaser, those were the values I thought they should be, or I knew would get you to like me or think I'm a good person, right? So my journey to truly get clear on what my values are was not so straightforward as I thought it would be in the beginning, right? And then there's the values we currently live and the values we see we're not yet living, but want to live, right? Aspirational. So getting clear on what those are, that's the first thing. The second is to make a commitment. Pick one that you have a more yearning to step into and pick one practice that will help you live that value more fully, right? And so that's something very practical. And if we were to give an example, or an example would be, well, one value I'm living, I got to tell you, I do not like this value. I'm going to tell you now. But I've chosen to live it more fully because I can see that it serves me and other people, and that is the value of patience. And why? Because patience, actually, if we go back to the examples earlier of the ways I can push people away, the shadow side of some of my strengths, right? Come on, want meaning now. Don't stay superficial. Let's go. Come on, we got to do this now, right? It serves the greater purpose that I have, which is not ever in a manipulative way, right? We know my company's has the word authentic in it. That's one of my values, but in a way which serves the purpose of drawing more people to, not to me, but to the higher message, let's say, that I really have an intention of living. Patience is going to serve that, right? And so what does it mean for me as a daily practice when I want to, basically it's zipping it more, essentially, zip it, lock it, put it in my pocket. So when I feel like I want to say something in terms of encouraging people to accelerate, I take a step back. And that is a daily practice that's not easy. But those of us who know about the comfort and learning zone, right? So 3 concentric circles with comfort, learning, freak out zone, as we like to say in the US. I'm definitely stepping out of my comfort zone, but with time, that comfort zone will expand. And so it will become easier. And so that's just my example. It could be any value out there, right? We could talk about impact. What does impact mean to you? How can you practice living it, right? So essentially, it's getting clear on the values, what they are, what you want to live more fully. It is, second one is starting a practice with one of them that helps you live it more fully. And the third is really to, throughout that process, remember who you really are, like what your essence is, right? Just to really keep remembering your worth. Because those of us who start such a practice, it's not easy and basic, but the truth is it's really not fun in the moment, right? We go back to that. We don't get the high right away. It takes a while. The last 4 years, I've been through some extremely deep transformation, none of which, that's not true. I had made an intention about 8 years ago to go on such a journey, but the things that lined up in the last 4 years, I didn't consciously say, ooh, let me jump into some transformation here, right? And so I can't say that those events were fun, but here's what I can say. Today, the number of people whom I admire that notice a change in me. And it's like the butterfly to the caterpillar, get my thinking reversed here. Caterpillar to the butterfly, right? So the butterfly can never go back to being, I can never go back to being that former version of me. It's just not me anymore. So that's where the high comes in, right? A more sustainable high, if you will. But in the moment, it's not easy. And so when we remember why we're doing it, right? What our worth is, that is one way we can start stepping more into our purpose, because that's what helps us stay, as you're saying, more of a conduit rather than the channel.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. I like that very much. I think there's also, you said there's patience there, but there's also resilience, which is not quite the same.
Oh, love it. Yeah.
All right. It's the bounce back. It's the grit. It's I think this is the right thing. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep bashing my head against the wall, and eventually it might break down or I'll get a concussion. I'm not sure which. But the resilience side of things, talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you bring that in, actually, Paul. I'm actually going through that's being rawly honest here, as somewhat of a dark night for myself recently, right? And I'm so glad you brought that in, because patience for me is part of resilience. And initially, when I first heard resilience in leadership, again, I did the same as I had done with values, kind of approached it arrogantly. I got this. I know what this is. But really, there's so much to it, right? Because I've always been good with, for example, working out, right? Exercising. I've always had a really good program of eating for the most part, except for my Tic Tac addiction, which I had to put to the side. And but you know, a lot of it, resilience is also about our thinking. It's what we tell ourselves. And that whole perfectionism, um, impatience, those have been part definitely of my story. And those are what keep me back, hold me back when they come up, when they rear their ugly heads, right? From sticking to that larger version of me, right? That part where I'm the conduit rather than the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so resilience really ties in here, and that none of us, as much as we try, and I know in my 30s it worked for a time because I had a lot more energy, but you know, we can't give what we don't have. And so we have to fill our buckets, right? And if we want people to genuinely want to step into whatever movement's important to us, right? All of which really, in my experience, ties back to two things. One is fulfillment and impact, right? We can put whatever other, you know, whatever values are important to us, but both by living them more fully, we're going to have impact and fulfillment. And so when we're fully living resilience, right? So not, you know, just going to the gym to go to the gym, but go to the gym because I know when I go there, I feel so much better. I feel empowered. That's helped me be more present for other people. When I go to the beach, which is my happy place, I feel, you know, connected with nature, with something larger than me. That allows me to take a step back and be more generous with my time, right? And my energy with other people. So resilience is key. It's the thread that runs throughout it because we can't, I've worked with teams and individuals. In fact, I'm just back from Amsterdam, worked with a team fully in left brain, fully in IQ. And it limits us. It limits, and with love for them, right? To bring in the L word, I really like them so much, but I also can feel it energetically and in the results. It limits what we can do. It limits who we can attract to want to follow the message that we're upholding when we're just in IQ. But when we can tap into our hearts, there's the love thing again. That's also where our right brain is, right? That's where creativity, innovation, aha moments. And for that, it's slowing down. It's connecting with our essence. There's that word again. And that, the number of people before I start working with them, whether it's coaching or workshop, will be, you know, at first they might think we're going to do kumbaya, you know, we're going to all go in chanting or something. And I always tease them, not yet. We'll do that after. But the
Get the
point is,
accordion out later.
yeah, exactly. But
The
the point, we'll
tambourines.
do downward dog later. But right now, you know, um, but the point is, when we start creating that space, a safe space where
Yeah.
people can just be them and let down those barriers that we, in many cases, rightfully so, have, especially in corporate world, right? We have to protect ourselves very often. But when we start letting those down and just being who we really are and connecting with that, it's it's amazing. Like, and it's not just me, it's easy for me to say it, right, to you and your audience, Paul, but I know you know this anyway, but for people, it's such a joy and honor to witness people experiencing this for themselves, right? That when they're really slowing down, taking better care of their hearts, their bodies, their minds, that they're so much more impactful and fulfilled. So no question, yeah, resilience is, it's the golden thread, I would say, that runs throughout all of it.
So we have clear, courageous, confident leadership that's resilient, that we are attempting to role model to the people around us. One last thing then, two last things, but we'll get to one. If you had 10,000 billboards and you could say one thing to the entire world, what would it be?
10,000, go vote. No, vote. No, I'm just teasing. We won't talk politics. It would be around just knowing your worth, being gentle with that. Really, I mean that, because it's very similar to the Gandhi statement of be the change you want to see, right? And without wanting to be trite with that, but it would be to just remember your essence.
Hmm.
Something like that. Remember your essence.
I like that. To
Mm.
thine own self be true. I like that one. Good. Okay. And then lastly, where can we find you?
Ah,
Where we need you?
so I have that great last name that makes many people laugh, right? Slaughter. And you said early Slaughter. I love the way you pronounced it. So my name, of course, is Colleen Slaughter. I can be found on LinkedIn. There are a lot of leaders. I get positive comments from people around the world about a bolder move of the week I do. So if you go to bouldermoves.com, and it is bolder like being bold, not like the city or the rock, right? It's BOLDERMOVES. In the first fold, first of all, that's my website. So please feel free to peruse and learn. But second of all, in the first fold, there's a sign up for that bolder move of the week, which is just a line or two, no more than that, because I know all of us are really busy, that you get weekly in your inbox. So those are the two things I would say, the website and then LinkedIn. And it would be a joy to be connected with all of you.
Well, we'll put the details into the description of the podcast here.
Thank
And then it just remains for me to say, Colleen Slaughter, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining me.
thank you. Thank you, Paul. I really enjoyed it.